evening. And, it is in evenings like this that I would like to have lessons on the flood. We've already done that. Or lessons of one of the various storms, such as whether Jonah or with Paul. But it's good to have everyone here. This evening we're going to be looking at that of really patience preserving your soul. Let's go to Luke chapter 21. Luke 21, and we'll begin in verse 7. Let's begin there. Luke 21, beginning in verse 7. So they asked him, saying, Teacher, but when will these signs be? And what sign will there be when these things are about to take place? Now, what are they referring to? They're referring to what he just said in verse 6, and it concerns that of the destruction of the temple. They have been in the temple. They're leaving the temple. Jesus has been teaching there in the temple complex. It's an enormous place. Herod had started it. It takes a total of 40 years to complete it. And matter of fact, at this point in time, when Jesus is saying these words, it hasn't been finished yet. It's still, but you can see how impressive this place is. Well, let's just go to verse 5. Let's just back up to verse 5. Then some spoke of the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and donations. And he said, These things which you see, the day will come in which not one stone shall be left upon another that shall not be thrown down. He's talking about the destruction of the temple. All right? And here are one of those things that you can prove this. You can prove it. Did it actually happen? And the answer is yes, it did happen. And he is saying these things 40 years before they happen. 40 years before it's actually going to take place. He is saying this is going to happen, where not one stone is going to be left upon another. And it is correct. You cannot go to Jerusalem and someone might tell you, but there's not a place where one can say that's the temple on top of another stone of the temple, because it's not there. And what may be presented as part of the temple, the Wailing Wall, is not part of the temple. It's not part of the temple at all. And what Jesus says is it's all going to be destroyed, every bit of it. And so they ask him, what are the signs of these things? Now, what we're going to look at is really going to be rather brief. It is the verse 19 that I really want to look at, but let's continue on. Verse 8, and he said, Take heed that you not be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time has drawn near, therefore do not go after them. But when you hear of wars and commotions, do not be terrified, for these things must come to pass first, but the end will not come immediately. So he talks about things that are going to happen in the future, and here are some things that are just going to be. There's going to be bad things that occur. And there's also going to be rumors of bad things. Did they happen or not? Are they happening? Well, you don't really know. They're just rumors. You don't know. But the lesson here is do not be terrified about any of this. Verse 10, then he said to them, Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. That's a certainty. That's a certainty of this is going to happen. Now, the Jehovah's Witnesses want to make this into, because they've got to, make it into World War I, to say that is the greatest war occupying, never was there ever a war where you have all these kingdoms coming together to battle one another. And that's simply not the case. That's not the case. All I got to do is go back to Genesis, and I can see where there are kingdoms going against kingdoms. We have 5 against 4. That's a total of 9 being listed in the first battle/war recorded in the Bible. All right? This isn't noting anything new. It's not. That nation will rise against nation, that's 2 nations. And kingdom rise against kingdom, that's 2 kingdoms. There's nothing new here. But he's saying this is going to happen. And there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilence. And there will be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. But before all these things, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you. Now here's the big news. All right, all these things are really meaningless as far as anything you need to be concerned with. Sure, there's going to be earthquakes. And if you're in an earthquake, you're going to be concerned about it. But this is the big one. Earthquake's not going to do a whole lot. It can't be classified as a persecution against the church. It's not. But this is what is painful. But before all these things, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons. You will be brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. That's a lot of talk, and it's true. Every bit of it occurred and continues to occur. But it will turn out for you as an occasion for testimony. And that they do. We see that with Peter and John. We see that also with Paul. We see where you have Paul and Silas in prison, and what are they doing? They're singing and praying. They're singing hymns. We have Paul in front of Festus, in front of Felix. We see him appealing to Caesar. He's going to see Caesar, and there are those of Caesar's household that are going to hear what Paul has to say. Verse 14, therefore, settle it in your hearts not to meditate beforehand on what you will answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom which all your adversaries will not be able to contradict or resist. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but not a hair of your head will be lost. Now, verse 19 is what we want. By your patience, possess your souls. There is the lesson in this, the overriding lesson. All these things are matters of worry. Every bit of it. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There's these rumors of wars. There's wars and rumors of wars. There's the earthquakes and all these things. Once again, don't be too concerned about that at all. By your patience, possess your soul. By your patience, possess your soul. Now, in this, we can see the various ways that someone can become worried and someone can just become so discouraged and can become frightened and leave the faith. We can see that. And Satan will use any means that he can to try to break us away from God. Any method he can do that. We read of Jesus telling Peter that Satan had asked for him, Peter, by name, that he might sift him like wheat. All right. That tells me, that's kind of frightening to me, that Satan would know us by name. He knew Peter by name, that he would know us by name, and making requests, I want to sift that one like wheat. I don't even know what that looks like. All right, just that idea of being sifted like wheat, I don't know what that looks like. I know what happened to Job. I've got that. But I don't know what this other may look like. But understand that Satan can use numerous tactics, whether it is fear, or whether it's just extraordinary grief, or whether it is just being sorry for ourselves, or just being compacted emotionally, of where just this emotional stress on top of us because we feel like we are being treated unfairly. Perhaps we have been, perhaps we haven't. Maybe we've been ill-used, maybe we haven't been ill-used. It's just what we think. Regardless, it is by your patience possess your souls. So what does that mean? What does it mean to possess your souls? That means self-possession. That means self-control. Whatever happens to be going on in your life, understand that it may very well be there for the sake of taking you off course. That may be its intent, to take you off course. Or it may be just a thing that's a natural event, but Satan will use it in trying to discourage you, so to take you off course. There are numerous things that can occur all around us. Trusted friends now, as Jesus just said, betraying us. Of things that, accustomed to life, basically normal, everyday occurrences and everyday stress, now something really hard coming down on us, and it's easy to be discouraged by that. But we are tempered. In James chapter 1, if you will turn there with me. James chapter 1, beginning in verse 2. My brethren, count it all, and what's that next word? Joy. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. We will be tested. Our faith will be tested. And in that test, we gain patience. Just like someone might temper steel. And tempering steel is not easy on the steel. It's not easy at all. If you were being easy on the steel, on that metal, it would never be tempered. It would remain soft and pliable and couldn't really be trusted to handle any kind of stress at all. But once it has been tempered, which would be, if steel could feel, it would be very, very painful. Well, that's what trials are. Trials do bring about an emotion. And it's meant to be a hard emotion. That's why they are there. Because if it didn't try us, if a trial doesn't try us, okay, it's not a trial. It's not. And if it doesn't produce patience from us, then it's not a trial. Things that produce patience out of us are things that require patience. Things that require us to lift ourselves up and to have that self-possession and continue on. That regardless, once again, regardless of what's happening in my life, I will continue on. That there is something greater than whatever's happening here. Something's greater. It doesn't matter what the situation, whether the situation is even puts me in peril of my own life. That doesn't matter. There is something greater still. And let's go to Ezekiel chapter 2. We need to possess our souls when times get rough. And we see where God, in Ezekiel chapter 2, He is preparing Ezekiel for a very rough go. Ezekiel, I don't know what kind of life he may have had, but I mean, there's some things that he's a captive in Babylon. He's a captive there, so he's accustomed to things not going so well, but God is going to prepare him for something that's going to be even harder. And let me just say this: it's easier to take harsh criticism or to be ill-treated by someone who's not close to you than it is by someone who's close to you. All right, it's easier to be mocked by a wolf than to be mocked by a lamb, a fellow sheep. Okay, it's definitely easier. Now, let's just go to verse 1. So Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 1, and he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak to you. Then the Spirit entered me when he spoke to me and set me on my feet, and I heard him who spoke to me. And he said to me, Son of man, I am sending you to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me to this very day, for they are impudent and stubborn children. I am sending you to them, and you shall say to them, Thus says the Lord God. As for them, whether they hear or whether they refuse, for they are a rebellious house, yet they will know that a prophet has been among them. God is sending a prophet to them. They need a prophet. If they didn't, God wouldn't be sending them to them. There'd be no prophet sent. They need Ezekiel to do his job. God wants Ezekiel to do his job. Ezekiel needs to do his job. And this rebellious house, this rebellious Israel, needs Ezekiel to do his job. Even if they rebel against him too. They just won't hear that either. They still need him to do his job, even when they don't want him to. Even then, they still need it. Verse 6, And you, son of man, do not be afraid of them, nor be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns are with you, and you dwell among scorpions. That does not sound inviting. Do not be afraid of their words or dismayed by their looks, though they are a rebellious house. Things are going to get rough. And God expects Ezekiel to go through it. He expects it because this is what is necessary. It's necessary by God has a love for Israel. He has love for this rebellious people, and he needs someone going there who's going to speak the words of God regardless of the reaction, regardless of retribution or whatever may happen, that he needs Ezekiel to be the proper prophet. In this, verse 7, You shall speak my words to them, whether they hear or whether they refuse, for they are rebellious. Then we see where in this next section he gives him a scroll that is to be eaten. And this is a scroll that basically it's a vision. And metaphorically, what does it mean? It means you are to consume the words of God, and you are to digest those words. You're to consume them. You're to, what does it mean to consume and digest words? That means you know them. You know them. You have considered them. They are now in you. And you are very well acquainted with those words. You're very well acquainted. Now, let's go to 1 Kings. 1 Kings, we are to possess our souls even when there seems to be nothing but discouragement. In 1 Kings chapter 19, this is immediately after the demonstration on Mount Carmel. We have Elijah and we have Ahab and Jezebel. Both have been hunting the prophets and killing them. They have been hunting for Elijah. God has been protecting Elijah, harboring him in various places. And the Mount Carmel event that occurs is one of those short periods of time where Ahab actually comes to his senses, but he's not very long in it, of where Ahab doesn't try to kill Elijah there. But what does occur is a demonstration of who is God. Is it Baal or is it Jehovah? Well, it doesn't take very long. Well, actually, it does. It does take a while because Baal gets his turn. So you have all these priests and prophets of Baal, and they're doing their thing, and nothing happens. But when it's time for Jehovah, when it's time for Elijah to prove that it's Jehovah, Jehovah proves himself immediately. And it is shocking. It is unmistakable. And while the people earlier would not say, they would not give any kind of sense of loyalty, is it Baal or is it Jehovah? They wouldn't give any sense of that. Once they see that demonstration, this fire coming down out of heaven and consuming everything concerning everything of that sacrifice and what the sacrifice was laid on and the water that was in the trench around it, all that has just been lapped up by the fire. They're ready to do anything at that point. Now, one would think, I think this is where Elijah became very discouraged. One would think after all that Israel would have turned. One would think that you would have a king now, Ahab, who turned, and he would now be loyal to God. Despite what Jezebel wasn't there, despite his beautiful bride, despite her, that he would have tried to bring her along, but that he would have turned. But it wasn't the case. It's like, here's this monstrous demonstration. Here is this extraordinary event that you have just witnessed, and it didn't stick, did it? It didn't stick. Well, in my mind, if that doesn't stick, what will stick? Nothing with it. In my mind, if that doesn't stick, there's nothing that's going to stick to you. If that isn't a lesson that somehow you learned and think yourself very blessed by the love of God, that you weren't consumed in that fire as well, that you would step back and reevaluate everything and come back loyal to Jehovah. But it doesn't happen. Where Elijah, I do believe, would have considered Israel having now entered in a new phase, entering in the time of faithfulness, it didn't. And we see now with Elijah in chapter 19, 1 Kings chapter 19, we begin in verse 13. So it was when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle. We have God speaking to him. And went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts." And that's true. He has. "Because your children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword." That too is true. Yeah, both cases are true. God's not going to deny that. That's true. But here is how he feels, and it's not fact. "I alone am left, and they seek my life." All right, yeah, there are those that do seek his life, but I alone am left. Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, anoint Hazael as king over Syria." You know, he is calling for himself just go ahead and take me. If we go back to verse 10, the end, let's just read the whole verse. So he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life." They are wanting to kill him. Just go ahead and end all this. Go ahead and end it. That there doesn't need to be any earth anymore, I suppose, or any Israel anymore. Just go ahead and end all this. But what God is saying, not only is your life not ended, Israel isn't ended either. All right? He tells him there are things that you've got to do. Verse 16, "Also you shall anoint Jehu the son of Nimshi as king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel Maholah you shall anoint as prophet in your place." What? He's being told, there's 7,000 that haven't bowed the knee to Baal. There's 7,000 who have not done this, and that there are people you know nothing about. Not only are you're not the only one left, not only is that not true, but there's someone who's going to replace you, and his name is Elisha. He's going to replace you. So that this whole idea of I am the only one left and they seek to take my life, well, he's not the only one left. Here is this extraordinary discouraging time for Elijah. But here is a time to, okay, all right, enough of that. Pick yourself up. Here's some things I've got for you to do. All right, never mind your flawed thinking in this. Never mind all that. Get up and pick yourself up, and there are things still that God wants him to do. And here is when things are just have never been so discouraging. Keep going. When things have never been so low, I think the word is nadir. I'd never used that word in a sermon, but it is like the lowest point in someone's life. You don't get any lower than that. It never got more harsh or more sorrowful. And that's what it would seem here for Elijah, that at this extremely low point, well, there's going to be low, and there's going to be lower, and then there's going to be lower, and regardless of how bad it gets, God expects all of us to pick ourselves up and continue on. It doesn't matter the mood. God understands we grieve. He understands that we can be frightened. He understands that we can be have the wind knocked out of us and feel dejected and feel like we are just, as Paul says, the spectacle of angels and of men. Nevertheless, pick yourself up and move on. Now let's go to Matthew chapter 26. This is not too long ago, just a few weeks ago actually, we were discussing Jesus in the Garden of Eden when we were going through the book of Mark. In Matthew chapter 26, we'll begin in verse 36 in this, and just understand that, and this to me is encouraging, and it tells me that we all can be discouraged, including the Christ. If Christ can be discouraged, so can I. Okay? If he can be discouraged, so can I. And if he can come up to a point of just this extraordinary anguish, so can I. There are things in this life that test us. And as we said, tests are meant to put us under pressure. Tests are meant to be emotionally difficult. If they weren't, they would be nothing. If tests were only, here, have another slice of chocolate cake, it wouldn't be a test. If it was, here, let's watch another movie, it wouldn't be another test. It wouldn't be a test whatsoever. Tests put us under duress and in emotional strain. Verse 36, then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to his disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there. And he took with him Peter, the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Why? We asked this question before. We'll ask it again today. Lack of faith on his part? No, not a lack of faith. Does he have faith in Jehovah? Yes, he does have faith in Jehovah. He has more faith than any of us could have in Jehovah, that we should have, but he has extraordinary faith. One could, in what he doesn't need at this moment is just like bombast of someone sermonizing over him of his lack of faith in this greatest time. It's not that. It's that this is a trial he is about to face, and this is an enormous weight on top of him. An enormous weight like no one else has ever felt. Because for me and for you, we're not, our life doesn't determine the outcome of humanity. It doesn't. Our life does not determine whether there is forgiveness of sins or not. Our life doesn't determine that. But Jesus's did. That was his mission. And here he is sorrowful and deeply distressed, and even says so. Verse 38, and he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me. Because while he doesn't fear death, I don't think he fears that at all. Because he knows he has the keys of Hades and death. He's got that. He doesn't fear that. But it's everything, it's that process. It's what he's got to go through to get there. He doesn't fear the tomb. It's everything he's got to go through to get there. And it's no minor feat. This is no minor trial at all. It's going to be rough. And it's at this point of waiting for this final thing to click, we might say. We might say that the next shoe to fall. It's because once the betrayer comes, once you have all those coming to him for the arrest, you don't see him like this anymore. That it's done, and this is the duty. It's done. This is what we do. This is what we follow. This is what's expected. And he's going right along with the will, that eternal will, that is from God, the Godhead. That eternal will that was designed before the world even began. And here he is, sorrowful even to death. And let's just read verse 39. And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. That's what he's asking. Here he is at really the 11th hour. And everything is about to occur. Everything that was planned before the beginning of time is about to happen now. And all of the hopes of the righteous who ever lived prior to Jesus arriving on this earth, all their hopes on him. And the future of mankind is on him. And the future of his church is on him. And the future of all those prophecies are on him. That it's going to come to pass. And he is the one who is going to do it. And here is this point when he's saying in verse 39, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Was he considering this as a possibility? Well, he's asking for it. But then he says, nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. It's not what I want. Because right now, while the Spirit says one thing, flesh says something else. You think it was different for Christ? No. He's in the flesh. You think his flesh enjoyed being hungry? There in Matthew chapter 4. You think that his flesh, knowing full well, is about to be scourged and beaten and mocked, and everything about the crucifixion, everything about the trial, everything throughout until he dies is not just about killing him, it's about breaking his spirit. It's about breaking him in every possible way, emotionally, spiritually, and of course physically. It's everything to put him in as tight of a vice as Satan could possibly tighten it. That is what he's going through. But God doesn't put anything on us we cannot bear. And that's handy to know. That's handy to know. That regardless of what's been put on top of us, to know he knows my design, he knows me, he knows what I can take, and I can take it. Even when I think I can't, God knows I can. Even when I'm sure I can't, God is sure I can. Therefore, it's to get up and continue going. That's what we do. And that is precisely what's expected out of us. And those words from Luke 21:19, by your patience possess your souls. By your patience possess your souls. This life will be, the Christian life will have trials. And they can come from different ways. Things that are just matters of nature, those aren't as painful as things that are just matters of wickedness, things of persecution that has been laid on top of us. But regardless of how we are brought under some kind of stress, we are to possess our souls. And patience is to be found in us. Patience to continue on. That there is something greater than this life. There's something greater than my comfort. There's something greater than my own being. There's something greater than my life here on earth. And what is that? That's the will of God. That's His church. That's the reward. That's heaven. That's salvation. Every bit of that is greater than my current comfort. Every bit of that is worth fighting for. Every bit of that is worth standing up and continuing on. We need to look at our own lives, where we stand. Every one of us have things that we can correct. Every single one of us do. And we need to look at ourselves in all of that and make whatever improvements, whatever needs to be done next. And certainly, we need to make sure that we're not withering away, we're not falling away. Make sure that we have a stronger faith and try to encourage each other in doing better and through the difficult times in this life. We ask this evening, if we can help you in any way, if you need to respond to the invitation, we ask that you come as we stand and sing.